So you mentioned that you think there's going to be a cover-up for Mr. Combs. If you were the architect of that, how do you think that will play out? Because it's interesting listening to you talk about the Epstein case, how they, be a good way to describe it. They stayed on the yellow brick road publicly as if they were prosecuting, but they ignored or intentionally put up barriers to all the offshoots that could have given the totality of the situation. How do you think that will work out with somebody like Mr. Combs?
Because Andre Damian Williams Jr. is the U.S. attorney overseeing that. We know that he covered up the Epstein network by only calling those 4 witnesses. So the fix is in. This guy is dirty. He's a dirty guy, and we know that the fix is in. We don't know what the fix is going to be, but we know that the fix is in. And I would surmise that it would be something like what happened with Epstein is he's going to be, Combs is probably going to be indicted on multiple counts, and there might be some other people, but no one really in the stratosphere, because he held parties for people in the stratosphere. But I don't think that people in the stratosphere are going to go down at all. And I think Combs is going to eventually, they're going to give him the talk, I think, that they gave Maxwell. When I say they, I mean our law enforcement. Well, Sean, you compromised a lot of people, and you did a good job, and you did whatever you wanted, and you made a lot of money, but now you're going to have to keep your mouth shut and do some time. I mean, I think that's how it's going to go down. And I would be appalled. I wouldn't be shocked, but I would be appalled if those indictments didn't include children or minors, because we've got triple corroboration at this point that Combs was molesting minors. And people just don't come forward and say, I was molested by this guy or that guy. There was a judge, and he's a district court judge in Minnesota, but he was, before that, he represented a bunch of Catholic churches during the scandals with the priests. And he litigated with 500 different people and 500 litigants. And he felt that less than 5% were not telling the truth. So it's very, very rare for victims to come forward who aren't telling the truth, because you're going to be subjected to, I mean, who knows what you're going to be subjected. I mean, like Alicia Owen, the woman that I wrote about, she came forward and she had to go to prison and be in solitary for 2 years. Now, that's an extreme example, but if the FBI wants to get heavy with you in the Department of Justice, a lot of victims just fold. So it's going to be interesting, but I think Combs is probably going to get indicted. There's a lot of evidence about minors at this point, but I don't think you're going to see the big time politicians and athletes that attended his quote unquote freak off parties and indicted. I mean, that's just my surmise at this point. I believe that the fix is in.
So let's put our super conspiratorial hats on for a second. So Combs is going to go down. He'll be the person who gets the talk. He's told to be quiet. But all of the parties that he held, all the leverage that he has, all the influential people, will the government, again, this is with our super conspiratorial hat on, does the government then approach one of those people to fill that role and create another one of these schemes? Or do they, what do they do with that leverage? Is it just to control them? Do they want to control the narrative? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Epstein's safe was drilled, and hundreds, if not thousands, of DVDs were taken out of his safe. And I've filed 2 Freedom of Information Acts, FOIAs, to get, I didn't ask for the DVDs, I asked for reports on the DVDs. And unfortunately, this is somewhat humorous. So after Epstein died, the Fed said that the case was closed. So I filed my FOIA, and then I got an email back from the FBI saying that the case was ongoing. So about 6 months later, I filed another FOIA. And although Epstein is dead, the case is still ongoing. So it's going to be very difficult to get that type of material. But as far as someone stepping in, I think that there are a lot of people. There's a lot of Sean Combs out there. And I've been told by someone, not, and I don't know, you have to keep in mind that I started investigating Epstein about 12 years ago. So I've talked to a lot of people and heard a lot of stuff about Epstein. And I think some of it's right. And I really haven't found corroboration for other things. But I've been told that there was like an Epstein in training with Epstein, which would be very,
that sounds reasonable, actually. You know, you don't want to, I mean, horrible analogy, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
But I mean, there are a lot of ethical eunuchs out there that want money and sex. I mean, and are willing to do anything for it. So I really don't think that you have a hard time finding Sean Combs and Jeffrey Epsteins of this world. They make themselves known, and it's up to who, you know, there's a very dark, malignant side of our intelligence that does this. And I'm sure that they're out looking for new talent all the time. I mean, I've been writing about this type of stuff for 22 years, researching and writing about it for 22 years. And there's no shortage of it. I just wrote about a network in Detroit that it was a huge network, and it was the police had so many leads, and none of them were really pursued. And it's called the Snow. There's a book written about it. It's called The Snow Killings. And these guys, and I'm pretty sure that there's more than one. The 4 children were murdered by people that were tangentially related to this network. And most people that are familiar with the case think that it just wasn't one guy that was killing these kids. And the one guy that they pinned it on ostensibly committed suicide. I mean, if you look at, I've got pictures of the suicide scene, and it's so obviously staged. I mean, it was, the cops or whoever did it could have done a much better job staging that suicide scene.